Hello, boys and girls. This is Aunt Fernita, and I have a wonderful story for you about my favorite Bible character, Queen Esther. Today's memory verse is from Hebrews chapter 13, verse 1. It says, "Keep on loving each other as brothers." The message for today's story is God's people care for each other. Who do you stay with when you can't be with your parents? Esther's cousin cared for her for a long time. Esther, a pretty little girl, lived in the land of Persia. When both of her parents died, Esther went to live with her older cousin Mordecai. Mordecai loved Esther and cared for her as if she were his own daughter. As Esther grew to be a young woman, Mordecai taught her all the things parents teach their children. He taught her to be kind and helpful. He taught her to be honest and brave. And he taught her to love and worship God. Although Esther and Mordecai lived in Persia, they were not Persian. They were Jewish, and Mordecai didn't want Esther to forget the God of her people. When Esther was a young woman, the king of Persia decided to look for a new queen. Young women from all over the country were called to the palace. The king would choose a new queen from among them, and Esther was one of those young women. Each young woman enjoyed a year of special care before they went to meet the king. During this time, they lived in a special part of the king's palace and were cared for by special helpers. Esther was such a kind and thoughtful girl that she soon became friends with the man who was in charge of all the girls. He gave her 7 special maids, the best food, and the best place to stay. Cousin Mordecai worked in the king's palace. He could walk in the gardens near where the young women lived. There he could find out how his little cousin Esther was and what was happening to her. Finally, it was time for Esther to meet the king. Would he like her? Would he like her more than all the other women? Would he even make her queen? The king did like Esther. Mordecai had raised her well. She was not only beautiful, she was kind and sweet, and she won the king's favor. The king put a royal crown on Esther's head and made her queen. He even gave a great feast for her. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the entire country and gave lots of gifts in honor of his new queen. Mordecai had cared for Esther most of her life, but he did not stop caring for her when she became queen. Cousin Mordecai and Esther were part of God's family, and people in God's family never stop caring for each other. How can you show others that you care for them? Think of several things you can do. Can you help people in your family? Can you pray for them or even sing a song for them? Maybe they need a hug. Show your love to someone in your family today.
This podcast was brought to you by Gracelink.net and Studio El Piso. For more children's resources, please visit Gracelink.net.